Okay, good morning everyone. We're holding here by Daf Tzadik Bet, Amud Bet, 92b, right on the top by the Mishnah. Okay. Right on the top. Mishnah. Someone wrapped a bunch of money in a cloth, and he's trying to hang it so it should he travels with it while it's hanging in front of him. But it turned around, and now it's actually behind him. The satchel is now instead of in front, it's behind him. Patur. He's patur because he's trying to do a certain act and something else happened. It's like mitasek. He's busy with something else. Some malacha happened, but that's not the malacha. That's not what I wanted to do. Now, you might say, what do you mean? He wanted it in the front and it went to the back. Big deal. But the main thing is that he wanted to transport it from point A to point B, and he's doing that. So who cares if it's exactly where he wanted to do it at the beginning? Right? That's what the Mishnah says. We'll see soon. But if it was he had intended to carry it behind him, and it swung eventually over time, it went in front, it's chayav. Now, in that case, it's the same exact thing. His intention was not fulfilled. Yet, he's chayav. We'll see in the Gemara. Be'emet amru. Be'emet amru means in truth, they said. We'll see soon what that means. Haisha chogeret b'sinar. There was some sort of they used to gird themselves, the ladies, in these, besides what they wore, but they also wore short pants. Okay, for tzniut. And she hung something on it to bring it out to the Shut HaRabin. It doesn't matter if this item was intended to be in front, and then, or in the back and it came to the front, or in the front and it came to the back. Because it's normal for things to turn around when they're hanging on that sinar. So therefore, when she took it out, her intention was that it would move around. She knew that. And she carried anyway, so that means she intended to do all that. Even those appointees who are appointed to receive the notes from the king and to give them to the runners. They used to have these runners. They brought the king's message out. Remember? Like in the Megillat Esther, we had the Haratzim. We had the pasuk that the good letters, the bad letters, Okay. So these people also, if they we'll see what that means later, but if they intended to give it to a specific runner, and they ended up giving it to a different runner, we just said same thing, chayav. Rashi says this pshat, and then look at the last words of Rashi. He says, "V'libi megamgem." My heart is worried, This he says from his Rabbein in this pshat. He's not so excited about it. Because it's not similar to the other cases in the Mishnah. The other cases in the Mishnah, things happened. It turned from the front to your back, from the back to your... Here, what I wanted to do, I did. I thought I was going to give it to runner number 1, I gave it to runner number 2. Okay. But I ended up doing what I wanted to do, so it's not so doime. So they bring down another pshat here from that In that case, it would seem like you might be liable, according to some. And they said that really what's going on is they used to put it in some sort of tube and they would hang it on their belts or on their neck. And sometimes it would turn around. But it doesn't turn as much as those things that are hung on the sinner of the lady. Therefore, the Tanna Kama doesn't agree with Rabbi Yehuda here. And he says, you're patur. Because you didn't really want it to turn, you wanted it to be straight. It's not like the case in the lady, that the lady knew, so she's intending everything that will happen. It's different. Rabbi Yehuda still compares it. Okay? Fine. Let us start the Gemara. What is the reason why, if someone intended to carry the satchel of money, and it should be hanging in front of him, and then what happens is, he goes, and by the time he does the malacha, it's already behind him, so he's patur. What's the reason? Because his thought was not carried out. So therefore, I'm trying to do something else. So therefore, it's like mitasek, for example. If I'm trying to open the door, and while I open the door, my hand hits the light switch. I wasn't trying to do that. I was trying to do something else. So mitasek, that type of doing is patur. So the Gemara says, it's very nice, it's a beautiful svara. But for that same reasoning, you should also be patur in the opposite case. The Mishnah doesn't say you're patur, it says you're chayav. If you put it behind you, you wanted to carry it behind you, this satchel of money, and it swung in front of you, you should be patur. But the Mishnah says chayav. But but his intentions weren't fulfilled. You have to break it up. You're right. The two halachos of the Mishnah, one sentence to the next, they contradict each other. And you have to say that the one who taught the first halacha did not hold to the second halacha. The one who taught is a different person that taught the second halacha. And they argue, it doesn't matter what you intended, front that swung to the back or back that swung to the front. Either you hold that's mitasek, or you hold that that's not enough of a mitasek. That's it. He says the kasha is very strong. It's two different madam. Omar Rava, my kusha. What is this? It's not a contradiction at all. You don't have to make it two different tana'im. It's the same tana. Well, so what happened? Dilma lefon of avodah la'achrav hainu taimi de patur dinit kaven l'shmira meula ve'alta biyado shmira pchuta. You know why you're patur if you wanted to carry the money satchel in front and it swung behind you? Because you wanted to do a good a carrying that would watch it well. You have money. You put it behind you. You can just take it off your back. You won't notice it. So you wanted to do a good shmirah, which is putting it in front of you. And now it went here. You're not happy with that. You're not happy with the fact that it swung to your back.
Yeah, what's so good? You're doing. You're doing an avera by carrying it in front of you. So what's so good?
No, let's learn this whole Mishnah. You can learn this Mishnah with Bishogeg. You forgot it was Shabbat, let's say, right? So we're talking about to know if you're chayav a chatat to bring a sacrifice. But you're right, the Mishnah is talking about everything. If you do purpose, even if you want to do it on purpose and break Shabbat, chas v'shalom, mazid, he knows, he doesn't care about Shabbat. Still, why is he carrying? He's not just carrying for fun. He's carrying to transport it from here to there. He wants to bring the money over to his friend's house, whatever. So he wants to carry the money in a way that's responsible, the good watching. And now it's swung to a place where he's not happy at all. It's not a way of carrying it. That's why you're going to be patur. But the opposite case is not just, it's the same thing, it's just the opposite. It's very different. If I was willing to put the satchel behind, I was confident enough that that's a good enough shmirah, which is a low-level shmirah, low-level watching security, and it swung in front of me. Kal v'chomer, I want that. For sure that's included in what I want. That's even better than what I intended. So that's why you're going to be chayav in that case. Because my intention, all the more so, includes what actually ended up happening. However, in the first case, My intention is limited to exactly to the front, and I don't want the back. Therefore, it's mitasek. Got it? But la'acharav v'balu l'fanav haynu time b'dechayav did it kamen l'shmir pchuta ve'alta b'yodo shmira mula. Over there, it got better. So they're very different, the two cases. Okay? Everybody understood that? It's good? Says the Gemara, Elo my kushya, but there is a little bit of a problem still in the Mishnah. What's the problem? The yukadimat nitin kasha. What the problem is, the diuk, the inference of the Mishnah is a problem. There's a little bit of an inference that is contradictory. That is going to be the problem. What's that? Sounds like this. If I wanted to put it in the front and it swung to the back, then I'm going to be patur. How did we explain it now? Because you don't want a low-level watching. You didn't intend that. You don't want that. But what does that infer? That if initially I was confident enough and I was going to put it behind, and it stayed behind, everything it was carried out the way I intended, then even though it's a low-level watching, you're chayav because you carried in the way that you wanted to carry. We don't say, oh, that's totally ridiculous, that's irresponsible way of carrying, that's an irregular type of melacha. It's a weird, it's a mishuna. No. Because it's only when is it going to be patur, the Mishnah says, when it's behind you. When you intended that it should be in front, and your intentions weren't carried out and swung back. But it sounds like if those were my intentions initially, you'll be chayav. Emos sefer. Now let's take a look at the sefer. If you intended to put it behind and it swung in front, what does the Mishnah say?
He's liable.
He's liable. Because how did we explain it? Because that was also in his intentions, all the more so. It's even better. Right? But what's the inference? Patur. It sounds like, but only if it swung in front am I going to be chayav. But if it stayed the way that I actually put it, it sounds like I'll be patur. You know why? Because it's so irregular, so irresponsible of you that it's not the way to carry that item. No one carries money in such an irresponsible fashion, so it's not the way to carry. You be patur. So the inference is, one infers that if it's you intended in the behind and it stayed behind, you'll be chayav, and one infers you'll be patur. That's a sharp kasha. So the Gemara says, Omer Rabbi Lozo tava misha shana zu le'shana zu. So on that's what Rabbi Elazar said. That's what Rabbi Elazar was saying. That you're right. They do contradict each other, and therefore they have to be arguing, and it must be two different matter. On that, says Rav Ashi now, Omer Rav Ashi, look, my kusha. This is, even the inferences are not problematic. Because perhaps the Mishnah is being taught in a loy mi ba'i fashion. Loy mi ba'i means not only this, but even that. Loy mi ba'i la'achrav v'ba'i la'achrav d'chayav d'itavid machshavto. Not only when what? The first inference is that I wanted it to be behind me. And it stayed behind me. That there everything was, my intention was carried out. That'll be chayav. Elo afilu le'achrav v'bolu lefanav itzrichle. Even if it was behind me and it swung in front, I'll also be chayav. Sal kadai techad min hoyu v'lo yitzav machshavto lo lechayiv kamash malom v'nischaven l'shmir pchusta v'osu b'yod l'shmir me'ula lechayiv. Meaning, all the more so you're going to be chayav. And the reason why it's meaning to say, of course, in that case, if it stayed, you wanted it to be behind. Again, the reason why the Mishnah is saying a case of le'achrav bala lefonov going to be chayav is to tell you that, not to make the diuk, the inference, that if it's behind and it stays behind, you're going to be patur. Just to tell you that even if it swings in front of you, you're going to be chayav, because even though you didn't do what you wanted, because all the more so it is considered that you did carry out your intentions. Okay, so now the Gemara says like this. There is la'achav abayil la'achav tanohi. L'maisa, this halacha of going out with something, a satchel of money, placing it behind yourself, and letting it, and it remains there. We saw that Rabbi Lazar wants to say that the one inference actually says you're patur. The other one says you're chayav. So actually it's a machloket tanaim. The Tanya hamotzi ma'ot befudato u'piyah l'ma'alo chayav. If someone carries money in his money belt, and the mouth of the money belt is upwards, which is normal, because now your money won't fall out, so of course you're chayav, because that's the way to carry your money in your money belt. That's the way it's protected. But if the mouth is upside down, like we had in our Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda says Yechayav. Okay? Because even though it's not so well protected maybe, but it's not so weird. It's not such a weird way of carrying things. The Chachamim say, no, patur. Why? Because they're not going to be protected this way. Rabbi Yehuda said to the Chachamim, there is a case that a guy is not so responsible. He puts the money satchel behind him, and it stays there. Aren't you going to agree with me that you're chayav? So why wouldn't you compare the money belt that's upside down to that case too? They're both irresponsible ways of protecting the money. So the Amrullah, by the way, so what do you see there? You see Rabbi Yehuda is going from la'achav you'd be chayav. The Amrullah, the Chacham said, the i'ata modeh kalacha yodav v'ragla shu pater. Wouldn't you agree with me that if a guy carries something on the back of his hand or on his foot, that he's patur? So, meaning to say, it's not the normal way. So the same thing, when you wear the money belt upside down, it's totally irregular. I said something to prove my opinion, they said something to prove their opinion. I haven't found a response to their words, to their proof, but they haven't found a response to mine. Now, when he said the words, aren't you moided to me that when you put it behind and it stays behind your chayav, doesn't that sound like they actually argue with him? Meaning, now the truth is everybody asks just the opposite. It sounds like you're moided to me. Aren't you moided to me? That means that Rabbi Yehuda thought that they're moided, that they admit. So what does the Gemara mean? The Gemara is trying to make, you see the Chacham don't agree with him. Because he said, iyat moided. So the Rishonim asked this kasha. They said, well, what type of proof is that? It's exactly the opposite. Iyat moided sounds like they are moided. Don't you admit about this case? So they say, what they say is that since Rabbi Yehuda ended off and said that they didn't find it a response to my words, so that means that they said you're right, it's a good comparison, but we're still going to stick with our halacha that the money belt upside down is patur. And since they didn't have a rebuttal to show that it's not a good comparison, that means that they hold it to comparison. So if it's a real comparison, and we know they hold by the money belt, you're going to be patur. Obviously, they're forced, even though they don't know why, they don't have a good reason, but they're forced to say that if you put it la'achrav and it stayed la'achrav, you're going to be patur else as well. That's the proof of the Gemara that the Chacham are actually going to say patur. Rabbi Yehuda said you chayav. So there we have it. We have a machloket Tanaim if he put it la'achrav u'bala la'achrav, a machloket between Rabbi Yehuda and Chachamim. So the Gemara says v'letamech, and according to your reasoning that you're trying to prove there's a machloket here. The ka'am le'iyat ha'moide b'chlal d'mechayiv Rabbi Yehuda. V'tanya la'acha yoda v'ragel divrei kol patur. But you're telling me that every time they say iyat ha'modeh, and the other one is arguing because he said loy matzel l'tshuva l'dvarai, so it would come out that Rabbi Yehuda, on the proof of the Chachamim, has to argue. And he would say that if you carry something out on your foot, or on the back of your hand, that you're going to be chayav. The problem is we have a braita that says clearly, a different braita, that if you carry like that, everyone agrees you're patur. So the Gemara says, El la'achiv v'bo la'achiv divrei hakol chayav. La'achiv yodav v'raglo divrei hakol patur. The Gemara says, okay, let's change it around. If you put it behind and it stayed behind, everyone holds chayav. No machloket. We can't prove that there's machloket. If you carry something on the back of your hand or on your foot, everyone holds it's irregular and you're patur. Ki plige. Where do they argue? By the money belt that's upside down. One compares it to l'achrav and the other one compares it to l'achar yodei and ragli. Okay? The Chachomim say that what? At least in the case that what? Moitzi l'acharav. The real problem is not that someone could snatch it. The real problem is that it could fall. But it's still on your shoulder, so you'll still notice if someone tries to grab it off. So Rashi says, so at least you're protecting it somewhat. There's some sort of normalcy to this act. Because it's protected from ganavim. However, if you wear your money belt upside down, they're going to fall. They're for sure going to fall, and therefore, fine. Now the Gemara goes to the case of the lady that wears these pants, these sinner for tzniut, and and she has things that are tied onto them or hanging on them. And the norm, she knows, it's always going to be moving around. So therefore, it doesn't matter what happens. It's all in her intentions because she knows that that's the derech. Okay, so it said over there be'emet amru. So what does it mean be'emet amru? Tona kol be'emet halacha hi. Every time it says emet, it means that that's the halacha, and nobody argues. Sometimes there are Rashis that say it means halacha l'moshe Sinai. Rabbi Yehuda omer af mekabel pitakin, even those the people who receive the notes to give to the runners. Tana, it was a bright that taught shekein lav lore malchut osin kein, because the scribes of the king do so. Sometimes the scribe of the king wants to give it to a specific runner and he can't find him, and the matter that he had to write, the scribe for the king, is of utmost importance and there's an urgency, and therefore he gives it to another rider, to another runner, and therefore it's considered that his machshava was nikuyam. If you learn it that way in Rashi, if you learn the other way, that the tube moves around, it's considered that what he wanted was done. Okay. Now, Rabotai, we're starting a new Mishnah. Let's get into it over here. Okay, this coming sugya is very yesodistic. It's very foundational. Back to the basics. I'm sure you heard of this halacha. Two people that carry out a bench, patur. If you do a malacha with somebody else, have you heard of that? Shnayim she'osu. Two people that do something patur. You have to do the whole thing by yourself. So we're about to enter this to an amazing sugya. Okay, hamoitzi kikar l'shus ram chayv. It's shnayim ptur. If someone carries out a loaf of bread to Reshut Rabim, chayav, right? Obviously, there's no chiddush in that case. It's just an introduction to the next cases. Hotzi'u shnayim. If two people carried out a loaf of bread, now in that case, both people can carry out the loaf of bread by themselves. We call that a case of ze yachol v'ze yachol. This one could do it, the whole malach himself, and this one could do it. No one needs each other. But they did it together. For whatever reason. They're patur. Okay? We're going to learn this out from Pasuk.
Do they each have a separate loaf of bread?
No. The same loaf of bread.
They're
Carrying together. The Mishnah picks a case which is obvious that they could both carry it out themselves. It's just a loaf of bread. It's not heavy. But they both carried out together, they're patur, because the Torah says in the story of breaking a law, a sin, by mistake, and bringing a chatat, ba'asotah. It says there, ba'asotah, when you do it. Okay? And we're going to learn over here that we learn from that pasuk, only when one individual does the sin himself, not when two people do it together. So therefore it's patur. Are you allowed to do that on Shabbat? No, midirabanan, but mideoraita, that's not the sin. What about if one could not carry it out himself because it's not a loaf of bread, or he's very weak, whatever the story is, or it's a heavy thing, and one guy cannot carry it out. The other guy is strong enough, he doesn't need help with anybody else. He can carry it out. Okay? And both of them carried out, chayavin. V'yitzu shnayim chayavin. Rabbi Shimon poter. Now, what is this case exactly? Is this case that neither of them could do it, or one can't do it? Okay, so let's see the Gemara. Okay, Omar Rabbi Yehuda Omar Rav. V'amri lo Omar Abaye v'amri lo b'masnis tono. Yehuda said in the name of Rav, and some say that Abaye said it, and some say that it was actually a Braita. Ze yochel v'ze yochel, Rabbi Meir Mechayev, Rabbi Yehuda v'Rabbi Shimon Poiter. If they're both able to do the whole malacha themselves, but they do it together anyways, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda say patur. Now, the simple understanding of why you're patur in that case, why you're patur, is because two people did it, and the Torah is, we're going to see the psukim soon, how they darshan. Ba'asotah says one person has to do it. This is something that was able to be done by one person, and you both did it. That's not the malach. So Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon is poter. Rabbi Meir says chayav. Okay, Rabbi Meir says you chayav in that case. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon say you're going to be patur. Ze ene yachol. We'll see why Rabbi Meir says that. We'll have to go through the psukim soon. Ze ene yachol v'ze ene yachol. What about if they both cannot? Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir mechayvim, Rabbi Shimon poter. Here, Rabbi Yehuda moves over to Rabbi Meir's camp, and he says Yechayav. Okay? Rabbi Shimon says patur. Okay? So, if they both cannot, so they both need each other, so this is the normal way of doing this act, of doing the melacha. This is the normal way of carrying out this heavy table. I can't do it myself, you can't do it yourself. What is the normal way of carrying something? Two together. So therefore we're chayav. That's what Meir and Rabbi Yehuda hold. But Rabbi Shimon still says you're patur. Two people you can't be chayav. We'll see soon the pasuk. Two people can't be chayav. What about zeyachol v'ze'eneyachol? One guy could do it, and one guy cannot do it, and they both do it together. Divrei akol chayav. In that case, everybody holds you're going to be chayav. Okay, now who's going to be chayav?
The one who can do it.
The one who can do it, or the one who can't do it? The Gemara is going to ask this question. The Gemara has to have two tzaddim. Okay, now why do you say the one who could do it?
He could do it by himself. So then
The other guy is like insignificant for him.
he can't do it by himself. So if he's helping him to do it, the other guy could have done it by himself anyways. Not that she know it.
Aha. So you just disregard the other guy, and I'm doing the whole thing myself. I don't really need you, so we don't consider you that you're here even. So I'm doing it all myself because I could do it myself. That's one svara. That is one svara. On the other hand, we'll see soon a different svara. That since you could do it yourself and you did it with someone else, for you it's irregular. For the other guy that needs you, for him he needs, so he's chayav. You see? So the Gemara is going to ask this two ways. We don't know who's chayav, but someone's chayav here. Okay? Now, even though the Gemara is going to explain it to us, I think we should review this breita, just the halachas here. It can mix you up a little bit. So let's get to the cases again. If they both could do it, and they do it together, the mayor is the only one that says chayav. Okay? Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon say patur. If none of them could do it, then Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, they say chayav. Because this is normal, you both need each other. This is the normal carrying. Rabbi Shimon still says patur. And he agrees with everyone that if one could and one can't, then someone's chayav. We don't know who. Okay? It's very geshmak. You ready? Tanya nami hachi. We also learned in a brayta. Hamotziki kar l'reshut rabim. If someone carries a loaf of bread to reshut rabim, chayav. Hotziu shnaim. But if two people took out the loaf of bread, okay, this is just like our Mishnah. But here it says more details. It says more names. Rabbi Meir mechayev. Rabbi Yehuda omer im lo yachol echad lo hotziu v'hotziu shnaim chayavin. Ve'im lav pturin. Rabbi Yehuda says if none of them could carry it out, then how could they not be able to carry out a loaf of bread? Whatever, they're very sick, infirm, they're old, whatever it is, it's a large loaf, they need help, then they're chayav. Then I agree with you. But if each one can carry it out, piturin, like we saw in the Brayta. Rabbi Shimon poter. And Rabbi Shimon says, even if none of them had the strength to carry it out and they needed each other, patur. So the Gemara says, where do these opinions come from? How's everybody just like popping out opinions over here? They're nice svarot, this way. You need psukim here. Because the Rabbanon taught, the Torah says, ba'asotah. When, what's the full pasuk? V'im nefesh achat techeta v'shkaga me'am ha'aretz. If one soul sinned inadvertently from the nation, ba'asotah, when he did it, achat mi mitzvot Hashem, one of the commandments of Hashem, asher lo te'esan, which he shouldn't have done, ve'Hashem, and he was guilty of doing it. There he brings a karban chatat. So therefore, they dash it like this: ha'oseh et kula v'lo ha'oseh et miktzata. Ba'asotah means ba'asot otah, when you do the whole thing, but not if you do partial. Okay? It's not about the people here, the drasha. One and not two. It's about when you use two, then you're doing only part. You didn't do the whole thing. Okay? So that Ketzad, so what's the case? So the Braita says, Shnayim shoyoichsin bimalgeis v'loigzin. Two people holding on to a pitchfork, and they're using the pitchfork to turn over the wheat, okay, doing the melacha of me'amer. Or two people are holding on bekarkar. That's a melacha of me'amer, of gathering the wheat together. Or two people holding on to bekarkar. Karkar was the weaver's stick. The weaver had a stick that the end of it was very sharp, it had like a very thin edge, and he used it to straighten out the strings in the loom. And it was a tolda of the malacha of Mesach, of placing the strings in the loom. And that is a malacha, one of the 39 malachot. And this, since you're straightening it out and making sure they're good, that's basically the same function. It's a tolda. So two people are doing that. Okay? Or two people are holding on to a bekulmus, to a quill. V'kotvin b'kaneh. Or v'kotvin, and they're writing. Two people holding on to this quill and they're writing a letter. Or b'kaneh, they're holding on, they're holding on to a stick, a reed, and they carry it to Reshut Rabim. You would think that they're chayav, because at the end of the day, each one is doing a malacha. You would think. So the Torah said no, ba'asuta. Torah learns, we teaches us in this pasuk, you gotta do the complete thing yourself. Here, you're doing the malacha, but someone else is doing another part of the malacha. So you're only a partial doing the malacha, and that's not enough. You're not chayav. Okay? Midoraita, you're not chayav to bring a chatat. The eagle shedvela, but however, in a fig cake, eagle shedvela is brought all across Shas. They used to dry figs, and then stick them all together, and they made this massive dried fig cake. And you had to cut it apart with these really like axes and strong knives, okay? You take that big fig cake and you bring it out to Reshut Rabim. Okay, both of these guys. Or they're holding on to a beam and they bring it out to Reshut Rabim, which are very large items. Oh, so what's this case? The first case was, they're doing a melacha, they're writing with a quill, they're carrying a reed. That's ze yochol, v'ze yachol. So there it's patur. But this is ze eino yochol, v'ze eino yachol. Nobody could carry out this beam by themselves. Nobody could carry out this fig cake. It's very heavy. So Rabbi Yehuda Omer, im lo yachol echad ha'otzia v'otziu shnayim chayavin. V'im lav turim. So Rabbi Yehuda says, if they both can't do it, they're chayav. Only if not, meaning if the beam was not that heavy, then they're patur. But if it was so heavy that they needed each other, because ze eino yachol v'ze eino yachol, they're chayav. Rabbi Shimon Omer, this is we're not saying anything new, but it's new braitot that bring it out and the psukim. Rabbi Shimon Omer, af al pi lo yachol echad lehotzio v'hotziu shnayim pturim. Even if nobody could carry it out, and they need each other, ze eino yachol v'ze eino yachol, they brought it out pturim. Lekach nemar ba'asotah. He says, because ba'asotah teaches you, yachid she'asa chayav, shnayim she'asu pturim. One that does it chayav, two patur.
Even if they need each other?
Exactly. Because he says, at the end of the day, how much am I doing with you? You're right, I can't, this is very normal to do it with you because we're carrying out this table. I can't carry out this table myself. But even though I need you and you need me, at the end of the day, I'm doing part and you're doing part. Part of a melacha is patur. The other shitot, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, they say, we don't care if you're only doing part of the melacha. At the end of the day, this is the way the melacha is done. So the pasuk is not excluding that case. The pasuk is only excluding when they're both able to do it by themselves and they don't. They choose to only take part. That's where the Torah excludes you and makes you patur. But otherwise, if we need each other, we're chayav. Rabbi Shimon takes it one step further. He says, even if we need each other, we're still patur. Because at the end of the day, I'm only doing part. Yeah, I'm only doing 50%. So here's the machloket. Okay, now. So the Gemara says, where do the psukim come from? The Haikra. It's in the following pasuk. V'nefesh achat techeta v'shkaga me'amo'aret ba'asota. Rabbi Shimon Tzavar, he has the most, he exempts even in the case where they need each other, where none of them can do it. So he's going to need the most amount of exemptions in the pasuk to even exempt that case. And he says we have a lot of them. So that's why there's going to be one available for this. Because since it will be needed to be expounded. So it's going to come for this case that he said ze ene yachol v'ze ene yachol yepatur. Because he says there are three exclusions in this pasuk. Number one, Talata miuti ktivi. Number one, it says nefesh. Nefesh is one person. That sounds like only one and not two. Then it says, achat, one. Again, one. One and not two. And then it says ba'asota, the famous ba'asota that we've been speaking about, when you do it entirely and not partially. Okay? So he says, nefesh techeta, achat techeta, ba'asota techeta. Those are the three. The first one is just excluding a very simple case. If I do the akira and you do the hanacha, introducing the first page of Shabbat with the ashir and the ani, right? The balabait and the ani. So then we're patur. How do you know you're patur? Maybe at the end of the day, me and you, the balabait and the ani, we got this malacha done. So maybe we should both be chayav. Even though I did. So that case is the least chidush, the simplest. So that's why you take the first exclusion and use it for that. You need an exclusion in the Torah. We never get the source of that Beis Amud Aleph. We just said it like pashut, like because you only did half a malacha. Yeah, but at the end of the day, between me and you, we did a full malacha, so maybe you chayav. So that's the simplest case. Because I only did half a malacha. I was oker and you did meniach. That's what the first pasuk, first exclusion tells us. The second one, the chad, the mute is ze yachol v'ze yachol. The second one is when they're both able to do the malacha themselves, and they use each other anyways. They take out a little reed, they carry it out together. A pen, they carry out a pen to Rishut Rabim. So there, okay, wait, that's better than the case of doing half the malacha. We both did the whole malacha. But at the end of the day, it's not the malacha. It's not the complete malacha, or it's not normal because we can both do it themselves. So therefore, the second exclusion excludes that. The chad, and the last one of ba'asota, here's the key, is l'm'ute ze eno yochel v'ze eno yochel. That excludes even when we need each other, because I can't do it and you can't do it, and we're both doing from the beginning the akira and the hanocha, and we need each other, so it's very, very normal to do it like this. Still, we have a third exclusion. The exclusion tells you that since at the end of the day, how much did you do and how much did I do? None of us did 100, everybody did 50. Therefore, it's still called partial and we're patur. So Rabbi Shimon says all these three cases are patur. Rabbi Huda, chad lemute is the oikev is the meniach, like Rabbi Shimon. V'chad lemute is the yochal v'ze yachol, like Rabbi Shimon. V'chad, but the last one is not going to exclude ze eno yachol v'ze eno yachol. What is it going to exclude? Lemute yachid she'asa b'horat beitin. It comes to exclude a third case. You know what the ba'asota means? You did it yourself without your own mistake. But Beit Din didn't tell you. Let's say the Beit Din says, the Sanhedrin, Yerushalayim, they say, look, you're allowed to eat that piece of meat. It's not chaylev. It's not forbidden fats. We saw which part of the animal came and we went through it. It's fine. And you eat it. Chas v'shalom, someone eats it, there you're patur from the chatat. Because it wasn't ba'asota, it wasn't your own mistake. It was based, you were depending on the Sanhedrin. And therefore you're patur. But it's not coming to tell you that you're patur in the case of ze eno yachol v'ze eno yachol. Why not? Because in the case that you both can't do it, Rabbi Yehuda says, in that case you'll be chayav. Okay? Because that is the way to do the malacha. How are we going to carry out this heavy thing? I'm going to ask you to do it. So therefore, I'm going to be chayav. Even though we only did 50%. But that's the way to do the malacha. That is giving it all you have for this malacha. For Rabbi Shimon, what does Rabbi Shimon say to that halacha? How does he expound the halacha of when you do it al dat beitin? He doesn't have a pasuk available for that. Because he used it for ze en yachol v'ze en yachol. So the Gemara says, Yochid she'asa be'eretz beis chayiv. According to him, you actually be chayav. Now there's another girsa over here, okay? And the other Rishonim say no. What the Gemara really said is that he holds your patur in that case too, but he holds you don't need a pasuk. It's so pashut. If you only did it because of beitin, fine. So however it is, fine. So that's the machloket. Rabbi Meir, how does Rabbi Meir dash? Rabbi Meir says, Miktiv, it's a third opinion. Miktiv nefesh techata, achat techata, ba'asota techata. Does it divide the word nefesh and achat? It says nefesh achat together. That's normal. It's normal to write achat after nefesh. So therefore you can't really derive two exclusions from nefesh achat. It's only one exclusion. Nefesh achat is one exclusion, ba'asota is another one. So you only have two mi'ut. So trei mi'ut iktivi. Chad lemute ze okev ze meniach. The chad lemute yochid she'aso b'horot beitin. So therefore there's absolutely no exclusions. One is for when I do half the malacha, because I did the akira, you did the anacha. And one is if I did it al pi dat beitin. What about the case of zeyachol v'zeyachol? But we both carry this out together. Light thing. We both hold it and we walk outside. There, Rabbi Meir says there's no pasuk to exclude that. You'll be chayav. Even v'zeyachol, you'll be chayav. Why? But you don't need me, I don't need you. It's irregular. I can come up with so many svaras. I'm only doing part. He says, I don't care if you're only doing part. L'maisa, malacha was done with you. I don't care that you could do it yourself, you don't need him. Doesn't matter, there's no pasuk to exclude it. Okay? Now that, Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda, they hold there is a pasuk to exclude it. Their machloket is only by v'ze'enu yachol, v'ze'enu yachol. Okay? Now don't forget, there's another case. This last piece of the Braita, the one with the psukim, didn't bring. Ze yachol, v'ze'enu yachol. That like hybrid case, that mixture case, where we said everyone agrees you're chayav, but we don't know who. Aha. So now we go back to this case. Omar mar ze yachol v'ze yachol the divrei hakol chayav. Hai minahu mechayav. Which one of them is chayav? Okay. So now let's explain that the way we explained that before. We really spoke it out before, but let's just say it again very clearly. According to Rabbi Yehuda, okay? According to Rabbi Yehuda, what's the halacha by Zeh Yachol v'Zeh Yachol? Rabbatai, what's the halacha by Zeh Yachol v'Zeh Yachol? According to Rabbi Yehuda.
They're liable.
They're both able to do it. We both carry this phone out. So he has a pasuk. Since you could both do it, you're not doing it a whole thing. You know. So it's patur. What about v'ze'enu yachol, v'ze'enu yachol? We both can't. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you're chayav in that case. If we can, it's a heavy, big, large table, then we'll be chayav. What is the difference between the two? Why is one chayav and one is not chayav? So you could say that the difference between the two cases are that when we both carry out the phone, so that's not normal. That's absolutely not normal to both carry out a phone. One person should carry out the phone. Because you don't need two people. So therefore that's what the Torah is telling you. Since you did it in a little bit of, even though you carried it out in a normal fashion, it wasn't on your head like the last Mishnah, or in your mouth, carried it in your hand, but this is also included, the Pasuk is telling you that's also not normal. Because in the ability-wise, it's not normal. You're able to do it yourself. However, if it's a heavy table, which it's normal, so therefore you're going to be chayav. Okay, that's one way of understanding. Now, if that is the way of understanding the difference between when they're both yachol or they're both not yachol, so what would you say in the case that one is yachol and one is not yachol? Okay, I'll give you a nice example. Our age, we can easily carry this chair out. But we take this chair out with a 90-year-old. And he cannot carry this chair out. We know that. He's 90 years old. Me, you, chas shalom, not us, but someone like our age takes this out, young man with a 90-year-old. So it's ze yachol v'ze'ena yachol. So now, is it normal or is it not normal? For the person that's strong, is it normal? No. So if you told me that the reason why you're patur, when you're both able to carry this out, is because it's not normal, so then the guy who's strong, for him it's not normal. So he's not going to be chayav, he's going to be patur. So it must be, you know who's chayav? When we said so one of them is chayav, the 90-year-old is going to be chayav. Because for him it's normal, while he's trying to take this, to ask you to help him, he can't do it himself. So, and since at the end of the day he is carrying it, he's giving some strength to it, and he's carrying it out, he'll be chayav. Or,
You're putting the limb on him now?
what?
You're putting the limb on him now?
Yeah, whole thing on the 90-year-old. You'll be patur. Or maybe, scratch all that. The reason why there's a difference between the cases of zeyachol and zeyachol, where you're going to be patur, we both carry this out, you're patur, and the case of the heavy thing that we're chayav, because we can't, is because, listen to this, when we both carry this out, okay, since you don't need me, so I'm not really helping. So I'm going to ask you, what do you do? What do you just do now? I carried the cup out. He didn't carry the cup out. The other guy was holding it. He didn't need you. And you could say the same thing back to the other guy. Right? So therefore, none of them were really needed. That's why you're patur. But if it's a heavy item, nothing to do with derech and not derech. The difference between the cases that you both could and you both can't is not about normal or not normal. No. The patur in the Torah, when you both could, is because you're not helping. Your help is not needed. Not loopholes, explanations of why. Oh, you're saying it's a loophole. Yeah. But the Torah says it. The Torah says ba'asotah. The Torah says you have to do something that you're needed for. If you just there, shkoyach. So therefore, who's not needed? Both of them are not needed. In regards to the other. So therefore, both of them are patur. However, if they both can't, like it's a heavy table, then they're both needed. And if they're both needed, so listen to this, Amnon. If that's the difference between the cases of both can and both can't, the difference is needed or not needed, not the way we explained before, normal or not normal. There's two ways of explaining. Again, you understand? There's two ways of understanding why in this case that you both could, you're patur, and the case that you both can't, you're chayav. Either you say when you could, you're patur because it's not normal, and when you can't, it's normal. Or when you could, you're patur because you're not needed. And when you can't, you're needed. Now, if that's the reason, so now me and the 90-year-old, who's needed? I'm needed. What I'm doing is very needed. So I'm doing something that's needed. I'll be chayav. The 90-year-old is not needed. He'll be patur. So the Gemara wants to know, what is the understanding? Is it about normal and not normal? And then the 90-year-old will be chayav, because for him it's normal, for me it's not normal to use a 90-year-old. Or is it about needed and not needed, and then the strong man will be chayav? Well, that could, because he's needed, and the 90-year-old patur. It's an amazing shaila here, the Gemara. Which one is chayav? Omar avchisto ze sheyochel, di ze she'eno yochel, maika ovid. Rav Chisda learned the second way that we understood. He says, does anybody have time today, later on today? To come for like 40 minutes, 45 minutes? What time is Mincha here?
7:45.
What?
7:45. I have 7 and 7.
They have two now.
Which ones are we going to? Which one? Anybody want to come here at 7 o'clock? Or they pray in here at 7?
No.
The big one.
So
We're going to have two different times.
I have 2 now. 7 and 7:45. Oh, they do? Change.
7:45, 7:30.
7:45 is the regular weekdays.
is anybody willing to come here at 7 o'clock tonight?
Oh, man.
So we could do one more Amud. So we could catch up. On Sunday we would catch up instead of the whole week feeling behind. Yeah? Okay, so then let's just close this. So Rav Chizda says that it has to do with helping. And therefore, the person that's strong, he's needed, so he's chayav. Amalei Rav Hamnuna. Rav Hamnuna says, the Komisaya Ba'adei. Rav Hamnuna says that the 90-year-old should be chayav because he's helping, and it's normal for him. His help is not needed. Therefore, we don't really care about if it's normal for him or not. We care about if what you're doing is necessary, if it's needed, if it's required to be able to do the melacha. That's the way Rav Chizda learned the sugya. Bezrat Hashem, we're going to bring rayas to this from cases later on. Okay, so 1 second. So tonight, Bezrat Hashem.